Local news, national news, even feel-good news, delivering the topics that are relevant to you.
That's why I listen to Joe. He covers it all.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
So the very first day of journalism school, the first thing they teach you in journalism school is when interviewing someone, never, ever ask yes or no questions. Never ask yes or no questions. The second thing they teach you in journalism school is don't ask leading questions. Don't lead someone with a question that you ask them. And that's it. So that's it. That's your first and second things they teach you. I just saved you the college education of sending our young one off to journalism school. So don't ask yes or no questions because you'll get yes or no answers. Ask open-ended questions so that the subject that you're interviewing actually has to give it some thought. And then don't lead someone in anticipation of an answer. Well, Scott Pelley, who was the prime anchor for CBS News for, I don't know, I haven't watched CBS News. Gosh, I'm not sure I've ever really watched CBS News other than for a second or two. Scott Pelley used to be the anchor for CBS News. He's now on 60 Minutes. I think 60 Minutes is where they put all of their failed news anchors. So Scott Pelley had the interview last night with President Joe Biden. And I watched it live, if you will. It was not a live interview. It was pre-recorded. And I was really disappointed to see Scott Pelley's lack of journalistic standards in coddling our aging and inept president. He basically held Joe Biden's hand through an interview. Heaven only knows, and this was an edited, pre-recorded interview. They interviewed on Thursday. So I've put together, it was a 13-minute interview on 60 Minutes. I've edited it down to 2.5 minutes. But for the most part, I've edited out Joe Biden and kept in Scott Pelley. Joe Biden's answers are irrelevant. I mean, Joe Biden has no idea what's going on. His answers are irrelevant. But this goes to show, I want you to hear how biased the media is. And media bias comes in many, many, many different forms. And in this case, the media bias comes in the coddling of our aging, inept, incompetent president. By the way, he asks questions. 20 questions were asked. I counted them all up. Scott Pelley asked 20 questions. Out of 20 questions, only 3 of them were open-ended questions. 13 of them were yes or no questions, and 4 of them were not only yes, no, but they were leading yes, no questions. So he led the president in an answer. So listen to the supercut I've put together for you. It's 2.5 minutes. This is Scott, and there are 2 examples of Scott Pelley making excuses for President Biden in the interview. And by excuses, I mean Scott Pelley talks about how tired Joe Biden is and makes excuses for Biden stuttering and stammering and everything else like that. So keep in mind, here's the score of this interview you're about to hear. 20 questions, 3 open-ended questions. They should have been 20 open-ended questions. But there were 13 yes-no questions and 4 leading yes-no questions. Here is Scott Pelley from hang on. Now I'm feeding myself. Why is that happening? Yeah, I've got to mute that. That is really weird.
Myself.
Oh, heavens. What have we done? Laurel's not here. Why am I feeding myself? Greg, we need to turn something off. Okay, I think that's better. Are we good now? Okay. So here is the 2.5 minute supercut from last night's 60 Minutes.
Late Thursday, we met President Biden at the White House. It had been a rough week, and we could see it on him. Mr. Biden will be 81 next month, and he has said that when he's tired, his lifelong stutter can creep back in. Is getting the American hostages back safely among your highest priorities now?
Of course it is.
Can you foresee U.S. troops in combat in this new Middle East war? Because of what we're seeing in the Middle East, is the threat of terrorism in the United States increased? Is it time for a ceasefire? Are you asking Israel to establish a humanitarian corridor in that area or get humanitarian supplies? You would like to see a humanitarian corridor that allows some of the 2 million Gazans out of the area.
So that's the first leading question. All the rest of those were yes, no questions. That was the leading question. It's followed by 2 more leading questions.
Yes.
You would like to see humanitarian supplies brought into Gaza?
Leading.
Yes.
So you do not agree with the Israeli total siege of the Gaza Strip? Would you support Israeli occupation of Gaza
Yes,
at
no.
this point? Do you believe that Hamas must be eliminated entirely?
Yes, no.
Yes, I do.
And you believe Israel would pursue that after
now.
what's occurred?
Not now.
What is your message to Hezbollah and its backer,
Finally, an open-ended question.
Iran?
Don't.
Oh, but a closed-ended answer. Don't.
Don't
Don't come across the border. Don't escalate this war.
That's
Leading.
right.
Is Iran behind the Gaza war?
Yes, no.
Does the dysfunction that we've seen in Congress behind the Gaza war
Yes,
increase
no.
the danger
Does
in
the
the world?
dysfunction
Yes. That we've
Iran
seen are the wars
behind
in
Gaza
Israel
increase
and
the
Ukraine
danger
more
in
than
the
the United
world?
States
Yes.
can take
That
on.
we've
Iran
seen
the
the
wars
wars
in
the United States of America, for God's sake.
How do these wars in Israel and Ukraine relate to the safety of the American people?
Overwhelmingly, they relate.
Why do you feel so strongly? What does Israel mean to you? America's oldest president seemed tired from directing all of this,
Yeah, making excuses for him.
but he was very clear on what he stood for and how his policies, in his view, would see America through. Mr. President, given these 2 wars and the dysfunction in Congress, are you sure that you want to run again?
Yes.
Is the effort to normalize relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia now dead?
No.
That's
At
it.
60 minutes
that's
over
2.5 minutes there of President Biden getting softball questions from what should otherwise be a respected journalist, Scott Pelley from CBS News. I got to tell you, I would never ask questions the way that Scott Pelley just did. Scott Pelley might as well have sat there holding hands with him, rocking back and forth in a swinging chair on a porch at an old folks' home. Those are the kinds of questions you ask your old senile grandpa. Because you're not certain that your old senile grandpa is going to be able to answer the actual questions. I am mortified on behalf of journalism. I am mortified on behalf of news media for how Scott Pelley executed that interview last night of President Joe Biden. Didn't give him actual opportunities to answer questions. He led him in the questions. Again, the answers are irrelevant. There was no news made out of Joe Biden's answers. And I will say, to Joe Biden's credit, he has, in the times he has spoken, has demonstrated resolve in supporting Israel and condemning Hamas. So I will give Joe Biden credit for that. But I will not give Scott Pelley an ounce of credit for that absolutely abysmal interview of Joe Biden last night. And so here's what's going to happen is Joe Biden will now get credit, if you will, for doing a media sit-down interview. Because, see, Joe Biden doesn't do a whole lot of media interviews. He doesn't, because he can't. He doesn't have the ability to do so. He doesn't have the steely-eyed presence to sit down and have an actual debate/discussion with the media or a member of the media. He just doesn't have it. He's lost his game. I'm not sure if he ever had his game, but he lost his game for sure. Joe Biden lost his game. And Scott Pelley just spoon-fed him ice cream last night. Oh, just spoon-feeding him ice cream. Yeah, it's just awful. I am so embarrassed on behalf of CBS News and the once esteemed 60 Minutes for how they handled that interview last night. 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic in the WDBO app. Now, we'll switch over from CBS to NBC. I don't know if you know this, but NBC saw the return of Saturday Night Live on Saturday night. And NBC typically for SNL does what's called their cold open. And their cold open is when they just start with a sketch and they don't give it any kind of introduction. And then they ended up by saying, live from New York, it's Saturday night. Well, the guest host Saturday night was Pete Davidson. Pete Davidson is a former SNL cast member. He is probably most famous for dating Kim Kardashian while she was still married to Kanye West. He's a stand-up comic, but Pete Davidson's father, when Pete was 7 years old, Pete Davidson's father was a member of the New York Fire Department, and his dad died in the World Trade Center. And understandably, Pete Davidson has gone through, drug abuse and mental health issues, and I wish him nothing but the best after having gone through all of that. But man, just opening SNL with this. Here's Pete Davidson's opening from SNL.
This week, we saw the horrible images and stories from Israel and Gaza. And I know what you're thinking. Who better to comment on it than Pete Davidson? Well, in a lot of ways, I am a good person to talk about it because when I was 7 years old, my dad was killed in a terrorist attack. So I know something about what that's like. I saw so many terrible pictures this week of children suffering, Israeli children and Palestinian children. And it took me back to a really horrible, horrible place. And, no one in this world deserves to suffer like that, especially not kids, After my dad died, my mom tried pretty much everything she could do to cheer me up. I remember one day when I was 8, she got me what she thought was a Disney movie, but it was actually the Eddie Murphy stand-up special, Delirious. And we played it in the car on the way home, and when she heard the things Eddie Murphy was saying, she tried to take it away. But then she noticed something. For the first time in a long time, I was laughing again. I don't understand it. I really don't, and I never will. But sometimes comedy is really the only way forward through tragedy. My heart is with everyone whose lives have been destroyed this week. But tonight, I'm going to do what I've always done in the face of tragedy, and that's try to be funny. Remember, I said try. And live from New York, it's Saturday night.
That was it. That was the opening for SNL on Saturday night on NBC. Pete Davidson's cold open. I tried to watch some of Saturday Night Live, and honestly, it is just so unwatchable these days. I generally will fast forward to Weekend Update. I don't watch it live. I don't think anybody watches anything live anymore, except maybe football games. But aside from that, I don't watch anything live. And I fast forward to the Weekend Update, and even the Weekend Update is getting more and more difficult to watch. So I was just not able to watch that tonight or from Saturday night. You can join us at 844-580-WDBO with your reaction, 844-580-9326. Use the open mic in the WDBO app. Coming up next here on the Joe Kelley Show, the stories that you missed while you were at work today. We'll have that for you coming up next.
Now, the three big things you need to know.
Three.
Baseball, softball, cricket, and flag football are among the 5 sports added to the program for the 2028 Los Angeles Games after being approved by the International Olympic Committee.
2.
The U.S. House expected to vote on naming a new speaker at noon Tuesday.
1.
The U.S. State Department is sharing new death toll numbers of Americans in the Israeli-Hamas war, with now 30 Americans confirmed dead.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk.
Joe, when I heard that President Biden was going to be on 60 Minutes, I searched for another program and found Law and Order rerun, because there was no way in heck I was going to watch that interview as biased as CBS is. Thanks, Joe, for all you do.
Yeah, man, I hope you guys appreciate me taking one for the team by watching 60 Minutes. I watched the whole thing. Not only did I watch it on TV last night, but then this morning, as I was getting ready for this show, the Joe Kelley Show, I had to go through it again and edit it down. So I've listened to it now at least 3 times. And yeah, my mind is positively fried from listening to CBS and their just horrendous bias in interviewing Joe Biden.
Just clocked out? Let's rewind. Here's what you missed while you were at work.
Yeah, it has been a really busy news day, as you might imagine. Here are all the stories that you missed while you're in the office. North Korea may be sending weapons to Russia for the war in Ukraine. That, at least according to satellite imagery. Washington Post had that report. Bloomberg reported that the CVS, not CBS, but CVS, the pharmaceutical chain, chief financial officer is taking a leave of absence for family health reasons. I don't know about you, but I always find family health reasons to be a dubious reason for people to give. One always wonders what really is going on. Perhaps there really are family health reasons, and if that's the case, then we hope nothing but the best and pray nothing but the best for the chief financial officer of CVS. NBC News reported today that they will host the third Republican presidential primary debate November 8th in Miami. It blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind that that NBC, who has been so biased against the Republicans, NBC News, that the Republican National Committee would pick NBC News to host a debate. It'll be November 8th in Miami, and I can tell you right now, it is highly unlikely we'll have the rights to air that because, again, the Republican Party makes these deals with the individual networks. Once we get to the general election, those will be available for everybody to, and they'll be rights free. Washington Post reported, and again, this is, don't shoot the messenger, y'all. The United States is going to ease sanctions on Venezuelan oil in exchange for Venezuela's promise that they'll have freer presidential elections. Not free presidential elections, freer. So we have all the oil we could possibly need here in the United States. We could be energy independent like we once were, but instead we're going to Venezuela. We're easing sanctions on them in exchange for freer presidential elections. You can tell me your thoughts on that right now by calling 844-580-WDBO or use the open mic in the WDBO app. NBC News reported that a judge issues a partial gag order forbidding former President Trump from commenting on potential witnesses or prosecutors in the federal election interference case. An hour ago, Fox News reported ready-to-deploy orders sent to U.S. troops as the Israel-Hamas war escalates. We're told that 2,000 U.S. troops have been given the ready-to-deploy order. And we've got a story that's unfolding right now, first reported 7 minutes ago by ABC. There are 5 people confirmed dead in Brussels, Belgium, in what is being described as an Islamic terrorist attack, as an Islamic terrorist opened fire on civilians. We're told the gunman is at large on a motorbike wearing an orange jacket. They're warning everybody in Brussels to get inside immediately. Reports are that the gunman is headed towards the French border. It's unclear if he's going to seek refuge in France or if he's going to continue his campaign of terror in France. This is certainly going to be a time in which we all need to be extra vigilant for any kind of Islamic-related terror here in the United States and around the world. I'm Joe Kelley. You can join me at 844-580-WDBO or hit me up in the open mic in the WDBO app.
This is the new home of WDBO.
WDBO.
107.3 FM and AM 580. Orlando's news and talk. And where Orlando turns first for breaking news, weather, and traffic 24 hours a day. Listen on the WDBO app or at WDBO.com. Live team coverage
Starts now.
I'm Joe Kelley, WDBO News. Our top story, Israel and Hamas prepare for more attacks on each other as fighting between both sides continue along the Gaza Strip. Fox's Greg Palcott reports from the Israel-Lebanon border.
There are concerns of a second front developing here. We have been seeing Israeli artillery going out and flares going up as they kind of track down Hezbollah fighters next door. Hezbollah, of course, a serious enemy of Israel. They've got 100,000 fighters. They've got about 150,000 rockets. They've clashed with Israel in the past. They could be clashing big time here again. We heard from Benjamin Netanyahu today. He told Hezbollah, don't make the same mistakes of the past. Hezbollah also spoke out today. They said, be ready for all possibilities.
More than 1,400 Israelis have been killed in the ongoing conflict and more than 3,000 said to be injured.
This is
WDBO.
where Orlando turns first for breaking news, weather, and traffic.
I'm Tom Terry. Fall returning in a big way. It's going to cool down tonight. I'm updating just how chilly it'll be in the morning.
As we continue our team coverage, President Biden considering an invitation to travel to Israel and discuss the current war with Hamas, but it's not clear if it's safe for him to get there. ABC's Andy Field has the latest from Washington.
Senior U.S. officials say if President Biden goes to Israel, he would try convincing its leaders not to occupy Gaza and further inflame tensions. The Secret Service worried about not being able to provide the president proper protection, and the U.S. urging caution so far has not appeared to change Israeli minds as that government prepares for what seems to be a major invasion.
I'm Joe Kelley, WDBO News.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580. Orlando's news and talk. Connected to our community. Talk local issues and events with Joe Kelley. Use the open mic in the WDBO app and let Joe know what interests you. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
Well, we are following breaking news out of Brussels, Belgium, as an Islamic terrorist has opened fire on what turned out to be Swedish tourists in Brussels, Belgium. They were there for a football game, or what we would call a soccer game, and it's all captured on video. People are running for their lives. The gunman has gone inside what looks like a bank vestibule, shooting people laying on the ground. Again, this is unfolding pretty much right now, and the suspect is believed to have he's been shouting Allah Akbar as he has been unloading his weapon to these poor innocent victims there. They've already identified who the guy is. They've already got his picture and are circulating his picture. Salam Saluma. He claims allegiance to ISIS and stated that his intention is to avenge Muslims. That is happening right now in Brussels, Belgium. We'll continue to follow the latest and bring you information as we learn more. But again, this is a time to be very, very vigilant about things that are happening in our communities, and regrettably, and I don't want to cause any kind of a panic. I want to do quite the opposite. I want to put everybody's minds at ease. But here in the United States and here in Orlando, we are we're a target. I mean, we're a place where people come to have fun. We're a place where people come to enjoy their time with their families. We're a place where people come to escape the horrors of our world, and instead, people might try to cause problems here. So just be really, really vigilant. Keep an eye out. If you see something, say something, as they like to say. The FBI director, Christopher Wray, did a rare phone briefing for reporters yesterday, explaining that the threat is very much ongoing, and in fact, the threat picture continues to evolve. Here in the U.S., he says, we cannot and do not discount the possibility that Hamas or other foreign terrorist organizations could exploit the conflict to call on their supporters to conduct attacks on our own soil. He said that Jews and Muslims alike, as well as their institutions and houses of worship, have been threatened in the U.S. and said that the Bureau is moving quickly to mitigate the threats. There is an Islamic, oh heavens, I'm suddenly blanking on what it's called. An Islamic. Where do Muslims worship? Muslims worship in a mosque. Thank you.
Go, yep.
I beat you by half a second. So there is a mosque on my drive home. There is a mosque on Old Winter Garden Boulevard, Old Winter Garden Drive. I don't take toll roads. I take surface streets. I try to stick it to the man by not taking toll roads. So I add what would be a 20-minute drive if I took toll roads as a 40-minute drive. But I refuse to pay tolls, particularly in this time of high inflation. But there is a mosque on my drive home. And a couple nights ago, this would have been last week, as I was driving home, clearly the Muslims that worship there were getting out of their, and again, I'm sorry, forgive me for my ignorance, their service. And there were at least 3 police cars there with their lights on, in the parking lot as Muslims were filing out of the mosque, the Islamic Center there. And I thought to myself, gosh, I'm certain that those cops are there for the protection of the Muslims that are worshiping there and not investigating the Muslims that are worshiping there. That would be my presumption, at least. Christopher Wray, again, the FBI director, urging chiefs of police around the United States to stay vigilant. Saying you're often the first to see the signs that someone may be mobilizing to violence. So again, just be aware of your surroundings is all I would suggest. If you are certainly if you're Muslim or Jewish, and you find yourself at a Muslim or Jewish center, just be aware of your surroundings. Just make sure you know who the people are that are around you, the vehicles that are around you. If anything looks at all out of place, make that phone call, call the police, call someone, get inside, remove yourself from that situation, and do all that you can to be able to protect yourself and your family. Now, this comes at a time in which, and I want to make sure I keep this in perspective, but a horrific crime has been committed in a suburb of Chicago, Plainfield, Illinois, Saturday morning. A young 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy, so an American boy of Palestinian descent, was murdered by, this is all according to police. So the police there say that the child and his mother's landlord, 70-something-year-old landlord, stabbed this 6-year-old Arab boy to death. They're calling it a hate crime. And I don't know why we get caught up on terms like hate crimes. This 6-year-old was brutally murdered. He was stabbed with a serrated hunting knife 26 times. It's a 6-year-old little boy. And this crazy-ass white man, and when you look at his mugshot, you will agree. He's got what look like, you ever seen people who do meth and they've got scabs all over their face and everything? That's what this landlord looks like. He's more like a slumlord than a landlord. And he's got all kinds of political signs and stuff up in his yard and everything. And it's just, it looks like a slum. And so this guy used a serrated military knife, a hunting knife, how can you even stab a 6-year-old child 26 times? I mean, this child was so small. He not only stabbed the child 26 times, as the mother intervened and tried to stop it, she was stabbed 12 times. She is hospitalized. She is expected to recover. The boy's father revealed that the boy was very, very friendly and likely ran towards the landlord to give him a hug because he was just that kind of kid. The 71-year-old tried to choke the mom and said, "You Muslims must die." The landlord has been charged with first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and 2 hate crime counts. The Department of Justice, the Chicago FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office also announced a federal investigation into the murder. The suspect is being held at the detention center until his court appearance, which was or is slated for this afternoon. 6-year-old little Palestinian-American kid. And again, I don't want to. Things need to be in perspective here. The biggest victims of what we have seen thus far have been Israeli Jews, but lashing out at a 6-year-old child, I mean that is insane. And I hope that the slumlord that is accused of doing this is found guilty, and I hope that he serves the rest of his life behind bars for what he has done. What a horrific, horrific crime that he has committed. My name is Joe Kelley. Man, I know it's a real bummer. Sorry about that. We'll try to move on to some cheerier topics in the segments ahead, though we still have some real bummer stuff to get through, including squad members calling on the United States to accept Palestinian refugees, whereas Governor Ron DeSantis vows to admit 0 people from Gaza or anybody who is anti-Semitic or anti-American. Your thoughts, 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. Or use the open mic in the WDBO app.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Insightful.
You tell the truth from your point of view.
Entertaining.
Man, that guy is a lot taller than he sounds on the radio.
And engaging.
When we hear you on the radio, it's a good thing.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
So Governor Ron DeSantis says that he doesn't want to admit any people from Gaza. Not one. No refugees from Gaza. Nobody who's anti-Semitic, nobody who's anti-American. Nikki Haley, for her part, disagrees. Governor DeSantis asked about that from NBC News.
To that point, you've made it very clear that you do not think the U.S. should take in any refugees from Gaza. One of the reasons you gave for that is you said that all the people in Gaza are anti-Semitic. You have received some pushback on that, including from some Republicans, including some of your Republican opponents. Nikki Haley, for example, said today that, quote, America has always been sympathetic to the fact that you can separate civilians from terrorists. She also said that many of these people want to be free from this terrorist.
That's not the question. It's not the question of whether they're all terrorists. In Gaza, they teach the kids to hate Jews. If you look at the textbooks, Israel is not on the map of the Middle East. And so this is embedded in the culture. I think it's a very toxic culture. I think that's part of the reason Gaza turned to Hamas. And the idea, they elected Hamas, and there's a lot of support for Hamas there. So that's a very toxic culture. And I worry about importing that to our country. And this was really bracing for me to watch. When the blood wasn't even dry off these Israeli citizens who were victimized by Hamas, you had people in our own country celebrating Hamas. Now, look, you can have different views on Middle East politics. It's a free country. But to go out and celebrate them lobbing off the heads of babies and doing what we're doing in some of our major cities, that was really, really bracing. And honestly, it brought me back to memories. One of the searing memories I have from September 11th, 2001 is almost the entire world came together to condemn what had happened, Stand With America. The people that were cheering, though, there were Palestinian Arabs cheering on the streets of the West Bank and Gaza.
Well, and that was condemned by a lot of folks. And someone like Nikki Haley, for example, has condemned that. She's very pro-Israel, but she's taken a slightly more sympathetic
I get it.
stance.
Nikki Haley would import people. That's been her position. I get that.
That's
she
not
wants
necessarily
to.
her stance, but she says
well, I would not import. I would not import.
See the humanity potentially in the folks that are.
But you also have to speak the truth. And the truth is, in Gaza, it's a dysfunctional, toxic society, in part because they teach young people to hate Jews. That is endemic to their culture. And, we've been dealing with this issue. I remember in Congress, people tried to defund some of the money going to the textbooks, but it is really, really bad. And so you just have to understand that. And it doesn't mean that they're all members of Hamas, but what it does mean is that's not something you want to import into the United States.
So that's where you differ from your opponent, Nikki Haley there.
I'm willing to speak the truth. She's trying to be politically correct. She's trying to please the media and people on the left. I don't care about that. I'm going to speak the truth and let the chips fall where they may.
There's a lot of polling that has shown that a large percentage of those folks in Gaza do not want to be under Hamas rule.
Well, I don't think that you're going to find a lot of polling suggesting that they believe Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. And I don't think you would find a lot of pro-Jewish sentiment amongst the population, because you'd be persona non grata there if you took that position.
Governor Ron DeSantis just a short time ago with NBC News. You can join us with your thoughts at 844-580-WDBO.
Joe, did I miss you talking about this? But have you noticed not a single Arab country wants to take these Palestinians? Why is that?
You did miss me talking about that. I talked about that last week. I haven't talked about it yet tonight, but yeah, no Arab nations. And honestly, the Arab nations would be the best suited to be able to absorb the refugees from Gaza just for geographical reasons alone, rather than flying them all the way here to the United States. There are plenty of Arab nations there, but not a single one of them has an interest in taking in any of those refugees from Gaza.
Joe, two things. I think with people who commit crimes like that against children or hate crimes in such a fashion, I think a swift public execution, once they're found guilty, will keep people from doing that in the future. And yeah, I don't think we should be allowing anybody in the country who is, anti-Semitic or definitely anti-American. Why do we want anti-American people in America?
And I think we would all agree with you, but how do we figure out whether or not someone's anti-Semitic or anti-American unless they've published, unless they're on record having stated their hatred of Jews or America? It's pretty tough to figure out who's who unless they have published something somewhere. Coming up in a moment, you're going to hear what Donald Trump has to say, what one of his solutions would be. That'll be coming up after the news.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. WDBO Orlando. WOEX-FM HD2 Orlando. W297BB Orlando. Powered by Talon Wealth Management. Visit guardingyournestegg.com. Listen everywhere with the WDBO app, a Cox Media Group station. This is the new home of WDBO.
WDBO.
107.3 FM and AM 580. Orlando's news and talk. And where Orlando turns first for breaking news, weather, and traffic 24 hours a day. Listen on the WDBO app or at WDBO.com. Live team coverage
starts now.
I'm Joe Kelley, WDBO News. As the war in Israel continues, some Americans find themselves trapped there. And getting out has been incredibly difficult. But Governor DeSantis decided enough is enough and chartered a flight of Americans from Israel to Florida. He discusses possible future flights from Israel.
We're going to have more planes, definitely, probably two more. We think that there's between 500 and 1,000 Floridians that need transport back.
The State Department is also chartering flights out of Israel, but only to European cities, not to America.
This is
WDBO,
where Orlando turns first for breaking news, weather, and traffic.
I'm Tom Terry. Fall returning in a big way. It's going to cool down tonight. I'm updating just how chilly it'll be in the morning.
As we continue our team coverage more than a week after the brutal attack by Hamas, officials now warn of a worsening humanitarian crisis in Israel and Gaza. And now you might be considering how you can help from here. But unfortunately, at the same time, many scammers recognize your emotional motivation to help.
The Better Business Bureau warns many scammers use tragedies like this one to try to steal your money. That's why officials recommend doing some research before donating. The BBB says not all organizations are able to provide relief to the impacted area quickly. Staff say you want to make sure the charity already has a presence in Israel or Gaza. In Washington, Kirsten Garris, WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580.
I'm Joe Kelley, WDBO News.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. Breaking news to lively debates, covering the issues that matter to you.
I make it a point to listen to Joe Kelley when I need to fully understand what's happening in the news.
Now, the Joe Kelley Show on Orlando's news and talk, WDBO.
We are following breaking news out of Brussels, Belgium. There's a soccer match tonight that's happening right now, actually. It's a soccer match between Sweden and Brussels, and an Islamic terrorist has opened fire there. The gunman goes inside a building and shoots more people. Shoots people laying on the ground. Now, we are told that the Brussels police have now made either an arrest or they have killed the gunman. Either way, they seem to have neutralized the gunman. The soccer match has been canceled, though I would think that they wouldn't want those tens of thousands of people out walking on the streets right now as potential targets during a terror attack. But the gunman is said to have been neutralized, again, either arrested or killed. This is all kind of unfolding right now as we speak. We'll continue to keep an eye on that as new developments pop up there. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has been in Clive, Iowa today, and talking about different ways that he would address what is taking place right now.
But as I've already said many, many times before, I will immediately reinstate and expand the wildly successful Trump travel ban on entry from terror-plagued countries, territories, and places. We're going to, they ended it. And it just kept us safe. We wouldn't let people come in from certain countries where there's tremendous terror. Makes sense, right? If you're coming from somewhere full of people who want to kill Americans, we will not let you in. We worked very hard on that.
So while not using the same words, Governor DeSantis said the same thing. He doesn't call it a travel ban. He just says he vows to admit 0 people from Gaza or anybody who's anti-Semitic or anti-American. I think it's a little bit harder to identify who is anti-Semitic and who is anti-American. And I'm going to play some more audio here from Donald Trump, but I'll caution you, I wasn't able to pre-screen this. And Donald Trump is known for dropping cuss words during some of his campaign stops. But again, this is Donald Trump in Clive, Iowa, just a short time ago.
Jewish mothers and fathers should never have to send their children to school fearing they'll be shot or stabbed on a so-called day of jihad, which is happening. It's a day of jihad. Under my administration, we will proactively send ICE to pro-jihadist demonstrations to enforce our immigration laws and remove the violators from our country. Many of these people are not from our country, and many of them are being supported with radical left money. The money from radical left people, you know who I'm talking about. We'll continue the process we started in my first 4 years of stripping citizenship from criminals, terrorists, and immigration cheaters and frauds. They've come into our country at levels, and they're coming to Iowa, you know that. And it's dangerous. You've had killings that nobody could even believe. Nobody's seen the kind of killings you've had.
Former President Trump there. You can share your thoughts at 844-580-WDBO, 844-580-9326. I honestly don't know how any American can look at what's happening right now today between Israel and Hamas, with what's going on in Brussels, Belgium, and with the increased terror threat, as indicated by our own FBI director, Christopher Wray. I don't know how anybody can look at Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and think of them as viable candidates. It just doesn't make sense to me. You know, sometimes Trump's rhetoric is over the top, but his message is on point in that we don't want people coming to the United States whose plan is to destroy the United States any more than Israel wants people in Israel whose plan is to destroy Israel.
There's no rules. What are you going to do except dog eat dog? It is dog eat dog.
It is troubling right now, to be sure.
Why, when a Muslim is attacked anywhere in the world, is a hate crime, but when a Muslim kill other people is a terrorist?
Yeah, I got nothing for that. Governor DeSantis, again, vowing he will accept 0 people from Gaza if he was president as a result of the war between the terrorist group Hamas and Israel. He says you're starting to hear some people on the left say that if people, Palestinian Arabs, are leaving Gaza, that the United States should bring them in, potentially hundreds of thousands of people from Gaza. The governor says that in general, anybody who's anti-Semitic or anti-American or other toxic views, that they should not be admitted. I can tell you this, he says, as president, the number of people we'll bring in from Gaza is 0. We are not going to do that. This as a member of the so-called squad calls on the United States to accept Palestinian refugees. That would be people from Gaza. Republicans immediately push back on the idea to import thousands of refugees from the Palestinian territories. Progressive Representative Jamal Bowman, who, you'll recall, Bowman is being investigated for pulling a fire alarm at the Cannon House office building during a House vote to avert a government shutdown. Bowman directed the U.S. to accept some of the 1 million Palestinian refugees, saying 50% of the population in Gaza are children. The international community, he says, as well as the United States, should be prepared to welcome refugees from Palestine while being very careful to vet and not allow members of Hamas. Well, how exactly do you do that? How do you do that? And I go back to what Governor DeSantis said about the Palestinians. First of all, the Palestinians voted in Hamas. The Palestinians largely support Hamas. And the Palestinians are educated, even the children. He's trying to be sympathetic towards the children. And I could understand sympathy towards the children, but the problem is the children are being indoctrinated. And they're being indoctrinated with lies. Lies about who Israel is. Lies that Israel even exists. Lies about Jews. I'm in the DeSantis camp on this one. I'm in the Trump camp on this one. And for a travel ban, that is sounding more and more like a great idea to go back to Donald Trump's travel ban. DeSantis said something that we had an open mic about that I had said last week. None of the Arab states are willing to take any of them. The Arab states should be taking them if you have refugees. You don't fly people and import them into the United States of America. So we're going to be very strong on that, DeSantis says. Absolutely. Amen. That's exactly how it should be. 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic in the WDBO app.
Could it be that it's part of spreading the religion? It's a big part of Islam is to spread the religion over the whole world. And what better way to do it?
Well, I will say that it is also a big part of Christianity to share the good word, to share the good news about Jesus Christ. Of course, we have different tactics how we go about doing that. Christians, historically speaking, since the beginning of time, have certainly shed blood in the name of Jesus Christ. We don't do that these days as Christians, thankfully. But historically speaking, regrettably, we have. But Islam and many in Islam are doing it to this day.
If the people are coming into our country illegally across the border, then that makes them anti-American.
Yeah.
But that's the difference. Here, we're horrified by that man.
and he will never see the light of day. He will either get the death penalty or he will never again see the light of day, and nobody here celebrates him. But in Gaza, in a lot of the radical Islamic world, he would be celebrated.
Yeah, if you missed the reference on that, is 6-year-old Palestinian boy, an American citizen living in Plainfield, Illinois, outside of Chicago, was stabbed to death by his slumlord Saturday, stabbed with a serrated military knife 26 times. A little 6-year-old kid. I've seen this kid's pictures. Cute little kid. This guy stabs him 26 times with a serrated military knife. Says that he killed him because he's Muslim. Shouting that as he was stabbing him, "You Muslims must die," he said. Stabbing this child, 6-year-old Palestinian-American child, 26 times to his death. Stabbed the mother 12 times. She is hospitalized. The suspect is facing first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, 2 hate crime counts. The hate crime counts are irrelevant when you're stabbing someone to death. Who cares about hate crimes? 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic in the WDBO app.
I'm sorry, but I think they should just go to the Gaza Strip. Just freaking wipe it out. Wipe it off the freaking map. Take your licks, see what happens, and move on.
Well, I suspect that Israel's plan doesn't greatly differ from that. I think with the pending ground invasion, Israel's general philosophy is what you do to us, we'll do 10 times over to you. And I think they're going to flatten much of Gaza. And, I do regret that there is a bit of a bloodlust amongst some people. I don't share that bloodlust. I find the whole situation to be regrettable. I find the whole situation to be sorrowful. But I find the whole situation and what Israel is preparing to do to be necessary. They've got to send a message. And there are going to be reports in the days ahead. There are already reports of Israel being heavy-handed, of Israel taking it too far. And that, you've got to look at your sources on that. I mean, that is going to be the bleeding heart leftist liberal media and bleeding heart leftist liberal politicians who are going to accuse and do accuse Israel of taking it too far. And as Benjamin Netanyahu has said, as Hannity has said, as Kilmeade has said, as DeSantis has said, if Hamas put their weapons down today, there would be peace in the Middle East. If Israel put down their weapons today, there would be the annihilation of Israel. They would stop existing as a nation.
How the heck does the far left think that they can actually import thousands of Palestinians into the United States when they can't even figure out how to get a couple of hundred American citizens out of Israel?
Yeah, it's because we're not trying. The administration is not trying to get the Americans out of Israel. They're only barely trying now. And unlike Governor DeSantis, who's bringing them all the way to the United States, the State Department is only getting them out of Israel to other European nations, and it's on their own dime. They've got to pay back the cost of the flight. It is embarrassing. It is shameful on behalf of this administration. And again, I don't know how this terrorist attack on Israel from Hamas, I don't know how it doesn't have major consequences for the American elections. I don't know how Joe Biden still has impressive poll numbers. It just blows my mind and breaks my heart. 844-580-WDBO. You're listening to The Joe Kelley Show.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Orange, Seminole, Osceola, and all of Central Florida. Join the conversation now by using the open mic in the WDBO app. Now, the Joe Kelley Show on Orlando's News and Talk, WDBO.
Thank you so much for being a part of the Joe Kelley Show. I'm so glad you're listening. You can join me at any time at 844-580-WDBO or hit me up in the open mic in the WDBO app. Homer is checking in from Winter Park. Hey, Homer, you're on the Joe Kelley Show. How are you, buddy?
Oh, pretty good, Mr. Kelly. It's kind of cool outside, but I'm all right.
Oh, it's lovely.
Yeah, I want to make a comment. I think what they need to be doing is open up these prisons. Just like that jackass that stabbed that boy 26 times, They need to send him across there to Gaza. Open up these prisons. Send these prisoners over there. Let them fight. They want to be thugs, sell drugs, kill innocent people. Send them across that water. And that's what needs to be done in America. Stop DeSantis and all y'all are paying taxpayers for them to eat 3 squares and hot and get fat. Send their bus across that water.
So wait, just to make sure I understand. Send our inmates overseas.
That's correct.
All
Send them
right.
right on over. Put them on the front line, too.
I don't know what kind of soldiers they would be, but...
Well, I look at like if they're soldier enough to sit up here and kill innocent people for no reason, they can fight over there, too. They can fight.
Yeah.
They can take a 9mm and a gun and a knife and stab a child 26 times.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Terrible. Homer, thank you so much, bud. I'm so glad you called. Thanks for listening. 844-580-WDBO or use the open mic in the WDBO app.
Hi, Joe. So my question would be, why would they say Israel is going to be heavy-handed or going too far? When you have killed and bludgeoned and beheaded people and elderly and children in the streets and dragged their bodies around, what is worse than that? I don't think Israel will be heavy-handed at all.
Oh, I fully believe that Israel's going to be heavy-handed. I think they should be heavy-handed. I absolutely think they should bring the hammer down on Gaza, bring the hammer down on Hamas, bring the hammer down on Hezbollah. They have got to make it so miserable for them that they would never, ever, ever consider doing it again. They have got to be heavy-handed. But what I will say is they've got to be mindful of the ever-presence of video cameras. And just as an example, I saw a video today, and there were some dead Hamas terrorists on the side of the road, and some Israelis dropped their pants and started going to the bathroom on the dead bodies. Now, I understand where their anger comes from, but generally defecating or urinating on dead terrorists, it doesn't help win a war, and it certainly doesn't help in the PR battle. And there are multiple fronts to this war, and one of them is going to be a public relations battle. And there have been times in which the Israeli Defense Forces have been unnecessarily heavy-handed. There have been times in which the Israeli Defense Forces have let things get out of control. But generally speaking, they need to be heavy-handed in their retaliation for what Hamas did, but they need to be mindful of video cameras. Be mindful that my general MO, my modus operandi is I know that God is always watching, and that's pretty much the lens through which my behavior unfolds. Is I know that God is watching, and you just got to be mindful of that. But otherwise, they've got to bring the hammer down, and they will. They absolutely will. 844-580-WDBO. Or use the open mic in the WDBO app. I'm Joe Kelley. We will continue.
This is the new home of WDBO.
WDBO.
107.3 FM and AM 580. Orlando's News and Talk. And where Orlando turns first for breaking news, weather, and traffic 24 hours a day. Listen on the WDBO app or at WDBO.com. Live team coverage
starts now.
I'm Joe Kelley, WDBO News. Our top story, Israel and Hamas prepare for more attacks on each other as fighting between both sides continue along the Gaza Strip. Fox's Greg Palcott reports from the Israel-Lebanon border.
There are concerns of a second front developing here. We have been seeing Israeli artillery going out and flares going up as they kind of track down Hezbollah fighters next door. Hezbollah, of course, a serious enemy of Israel. They've got 100,000 fighters. They've got about 150,000 rockets. They've clashed with Israel in the past. They could be clashing big time here again. We heard from Benjamin Netanyahu today. He told Hezbollah, don't make the same mistakes of the past. Hezbollah also spoke out today. They said, be ready for all possibilities.
More than 1,400 Israelis have been killed in the ongoing conflict, and more than 3,000 said to be injured.
This is
WDBO,
where Orlando turns first for breaking news, weather, and traffic.
I'm Tom Terry. Fall returning in a big way. It's going to cool down tonight. I'm updating just how chilly it'll be in the morning.
As we continue our team coverage, President Biden considering an invitation to travel to Israel and discuss the current war with Hamas, but it's not clear if it's safe for him to get there. ABC's Andy Field has the latest from Washington.
Senior U.S. officials say if President Biden goes to Israel, he would try convincing its leaders not to occupy Gaza and further inflame tensions. The Secret Service worried about not being able to provide the president proper protection, and the U.S. urging caution so far has not appeared to change Israeli minds as that government prepares for what seems to be a major invasion.
I'm Joe Kelley, WDBO News.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. Talk and discussion on the latest breaking national news.
Crude oil prices continue to fall.
Local news.
You're not going to have Disney have its own government in Central Florida.
And stories that matter to you. Use the open mic in the WDBO app and let your voice be heard on the Joe Kelley Show.
I will tell you something so thoroughly repugnant, and I don't know how anybody can cast a vote for Joe Biden moving forward. Even on this one single issue, that the Biden State Department will send invoices to American citizens seeking payment for their rescue from a war zone. So if you take a flight out of Israel, if you're an American citizen and you want out of a war zone and you want out of Israel, and you get a flight from the Biden State Department, first of all, they're not going to bring you back to the United States. They're simply going to fly you out of Israel. They'll fly you to a European city. So they're not even going to bring you all the way back to the United States. The Biden State Department is going to invoice those American citizens seeking payment for their rescue from a war zone. This is the same administration that has flown countless illegal immigrants from our border to U.S. cities of their choice for the last 2.5 years in the dark of night, hoping nobody would notice. They'll fly illegal immigrants for free. The liberals will put them up for free. Saw a story today, Chicago. Let me see if it's still in my stack of stuff here. Chicago is now going to pay, $9,000. Yep. Chicago is giving migrants $9,000 in rental assistance. The liberal do-gooders in Chicago are going to give $9,000. They're going to make the Chicago taxpayers on the hook. No wonder people are dying to get out of that city. They're giving migrants $9,000 to pay for rent. The Biden administration flies illegal immigrants from our border to U.S. cities in the dark of night, hoping that no one will notice. We noticed, President Biden. But if you want to get out of a war zone like Afghanistan, we'll just leave you there. If you want to get out of a war zone like Israel, we're going to invoice you. We're going to charge you for it. I am appalled. I am mortified. I am embarrassed. I really hate to say embarrassed to be an American, because that's not what it is. I'm just embarrassed at this administration. I'm embarrassed. I don't want to even say it's incompetence. It's not incompetence. It's deliberate. They're not doing this because they're stupid. They're doing this because this is who they are. This is very deliberate. charging American citizens to get out of a war zone is terrible. Absolutely terrible. Shame on the Biden administration. Shame on the State Department. It's terrible.
Okay, I'm going to open up a new subject. When is somebody going to bomb any place in Iran that could be a potential for them developing or launching an atom bomb?
Well, I would imagine if Israel comes to the conclusion that Iran had something to do with the terror attack from last Saturday, that Israel will gladly do that. Israel will be the first to do it. They will most certainly, as they've done before. I mean, they will launch an attack on an area that they think could pose a threat to them. I'm told that she left a second open mic. That same lady left a second open mic.
And the idea of releasing that $6 billion to Iran under the condition that they promise to use it for humanitarian purposes, all that does is...
What is going on with the honking here?
She found all Paul Cross's traffic.
I'm at the University of Florida. That's how they behave around here. Those gators.
Those gators. What? I got to hear that again.
And the idea of releasing that $6 billion to Iran under the condition that they promise to use it for humanitarian purposes, all that does is free... Holy crap. I'm at the University of Florida. That's how they behave around here. Those gators.
Very bizarre. All right. Yes. Those gators, Paul Cross.
Oh, that's funny. Hey, remember when you were a kid, you'd honk the horn. You loved the way it sounded in like a parking complex or in a tunnel.
Yeah,
that's what these kids are doing.
There's got to be a reason for it. One would think that there's a reason for it at least.
Do they need one when you're in college? You're going to.
I was going to say it's
a Monday
at the University
afternoon.
of Florida, right?
Right. Is there a game tonight of some sort that I'm not aware of?
Yeah, the game is called Let's Honk the Horn.
Perhaps so. All right. Yeah. If you're just joining us here on the Joe Kelley Show, so here's what we got so far. Christopher Wray, our FBI director. Does anybody still trust the FBI? Does anybody still respect the FBI? The FBI says that Americans should remain vigilant. This as Ron DeSantis says that he will allow, if he's president, he would allow 0 people from Gaza or anybody who is anti-Semitic or anti-American. Love the idea. I think it's a little bit harder. It's easier to say we're not going to let anybody from Gaza in. It's harder to say anybody who's anti-Semitic or anti-American because it's harder to see what's in people's hearts. Unless they have documented their hatred of America or their hatred of Jews, be it either in their social media or any other documentation that shows that they hate America or hate Jews, I would wholeheartedly agree that those are not people that we want here in the United States. This as just a terrible story out of a Chicago suburb where they're accustomed to horrible violence all the time, but a 6-year-old little child, Palestinian-American kid, just a cute little kid, stabbed to death with a serrated military knife. This kid stabbed 26 times by his slumlord, their landlord. His mother was stabbed and choked. She was stabbed 12 times with the same knife. The slumlord who, again, when you see his mugshot, and you can see it right now at WDBO.com, if you've ever seen someone who uses meth or other drugs and they got scabs all over their face, and that's what this guy looks like. He evidently was shouting, "You Muslims must die," while stabbing people. This is a deranged lunatic who needs to have the absolute book thrown at him. So while Governor DeSantis says that he wants 0 people from Gaza and nobody who's anti-Semitic or anti-American, squad members are calling on the United States to accept Palestinian refugees. This as President Biden says, rescuing U.S. hostages in Gaza is his highest priority. We are told now that there are 2,000 U.S. troops who are awaiting their ready orders and are prepared to be activated into the war zone in some way, shape, or form, whether that is going into Israel to support the IDF, or if that is to go into Gaza directly and to attempt to get the American hostages out of there. That's yet to be determined. But at some point, There's going to be a ground invasion. The IDF forces have been queuing up and amassing on the border of Gaza, preparing for a ground invasion. It has not started yet. We are told that at this hour, and again, keep in mind, it's the middle of the night right now in Israel, but there are missile attacks from Israel into Lebanon. That would be to Hezbollah military sites there. We'll continue with more of your comments at 844-580-WDBO or use the open mic in the WDBO app.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Now, the three big things you need to know.
Three.
President Biden postpones a speech in Colorado to focus on the conflict in Gaza.
2.
NBC News signs on to host the third Republican presidential primary debate. It'll be November 8th in Miami.
1.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel will break Hamas as IDF forces continue to amass at the Gaza border, ready for a ground invasion.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. In-depth segments on topics that matter to Orange, Seminole, Osceola, and all of Central Florida. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
I love your show every night. You're doing great, bud.
So this is, it's really a thing here. Chicago's given migrants $9,000 in rental assistance. Again, greasing the skids for people to come over to this country illegally. I know that a lot of migrants are here, quote unquote, legally, and that is they're given their court dates that are 2 or 3 years into the future, and they've got to get settled in, and they're claiming that they are oppressed in other countries or their lives are in danger, whatever the case may be. Chicago has allocated $4 million to assist migrants with obtaining temporary housing, where the state of Illinois has contributed another $38 million. So more than $40 million there. This as Chicago is projecting a major deficit for 2024. They're projecting a $538 million deficit. Now, unlike the United States of America, cities can't print money. And so they're going to have to find a way to fill that deficit, to plug that hole of $538 million. They can't just go print money. And now they're given $9,000 in rental assistance over a 6-month period, which includes assistance for moving in as well as a starter kit to furnish their new apartments. 41 buses this week have arrived in Chicago, bringing the total number of migrants in shelters to 11,000, with 4,000 still sleeping on police station floors and staying at airports. 30% of the migrants in Chicago are children, the majority of them attending Chicago public schools. And they're just making it more and more attractive for people to come here illegally, when we should be doing the exact opposite. We should be making it less and less attractive for people to come here illegally by not giving them educations and free housing and putting them up in hotels and everything else that makes this an attractive nation to come to. We should make it less attractive. We don't need to deport them if we prevent them from getting jobs, which is what federal law states in the first place. I'm Joe Kelley. Hopefully we'll have some brighter stuff to talk about in the day ahead. We'll see you back here tomorrow, 5 till 7 on WDBO.